Hi, I'm Daniel Fisher here at Sweetwater Sound. Today we're going to talk about Modulation Matrix. And what is that? Well, basically it's a way of taking a source, some kind of controller, whether that's something that moves by itself, like an LFO or an envelope, or something that you move, like a key or a ribbon or a knob or a slider or a pedal. And taking that thing and using it to move something else, typically something you can hear, like an oscillator pitch, or a filter cutoff frequency, or an amplitude, or a vibrato rate, or pretty much anything that can take a source and any destination that is available on these kinds of things, you're going to be able to modulate one with the other. And there's lots of different ways to do it. And first we're going to talk about how did that start? Well, in the beginning, in the days of modular, where things were just plugged in via cable and every component was unique and didn't do anything until it was plugged into something else, you were able to create pretty much anything because you could wire one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And eventually we moved on to synthesizers that had lots of knobs, but everything was already connected. And then we went digital, and by the mid-'80s, we kind of lost all our knobs even. It was like one slider and a 2-digit readout. So a lot of the real-time stuff that we did sort of faded away, and some of the complex modulation faded away as well. But then it all started coming back, and part of it is because of plugins and people started getting used to that power again. Analog was coming back, knobs were coming back. As early as like the Kurzweil K2000 had VAST, which would let you take two different inputs and send it to an output and do something mathematically to those two things. And very, very, very powerful stuff. And the way I would describe it is Modulation Matrix lets you do the serious synthesis that's not the basic synthesis that's typically available on the front panel. It's a way of deep diving. And so this video is definitely not for people who already use Mod Matrix. You're not going to learn too much from this one. Although my next video, which is going to be on complex Modulation Matrix, it will probably be worth watching that one. But what I really wanted to do today was to simply get 4 different keyboards that had 4 different ways of doing modulation connections and just showing you how to do it on a basic init patch. I'm not going to be doing a lot of synthesis sounds other than the intro and outro music. I really just want you to see how to do it, and hopefully one of these will be close enough to how your synthesizer does it that you'll be able to get a little more brave and dig in and use it. And so the first keyboard I'm going to show you is the Arturia Matrixbrute analog synthesizer. And why? Because the matrix is so much a part of the synth that it's in the name, and it's literally taking up almost 1/3 of the front panel. That's how important the matrix is to them. So now how exactly do I do it on the Matrixbrute? Well, you come over here, and right now this matrix is laid out so that I can choose presets. And so all of my presets are on here. We were just listening to that preset. But I know that initialize programs start later on this. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to just have a very boring sound. It's just an oscillator with the filter wide open. I know it's not as much fun synthetically, but it really will help you understand what I'm doing instead of doing it on some crazy patch with delay and everything else. So again, sawtooth oscillator. But now I want to do FM, and I basically want to take an LFO, a low frequency oscillator that's basically wiggling slowly, and I want it to wiggle the pitch of an oscillator, which again is just a wiggler that's moving very fast. So it's moving at the speed of audio. So the way I do that is first I hit the mod button, and now this whole matrix goes from being a patch choice to a modulation matrix. And it's very clever in that you see all of your sources over here and all of your destinations up here. And then even more clever, they give you 4 more that can become any destination that you want. So it's even more powerful than this grid. So I'm going to start. I see that my VCO1 pitch is right here, and I can look down and I see LFO1 is here. So if I just touch LFO1, I can see that my LFO and my VCO are connected. Then this ring of lights here tells me how much is going to it. Currently, it's not anywhere, so it's at 0. There should be no vibrato. Now, as I turn up the knob, you should hear it. And if I chose a shape that wasn't symmetrical, like a sawtooth here, it will sound one way right side up and one way upside down. So if I go positive, or if I go negative, same shape, just instead of this direction, it's that direction. But I can do physical controllers instead of built-in controllers like LFO or envelopes. So I'm going to choose mod wheel. So I'm going to turn that one off, and I'm going to hit mod wheel, and it shouldn't do anything because although I have the matrix connected, I don't have an amount. So as I turn up the amount, this wheel will change the pitch more. If I turn it a little bit, and so I can exactly set where I want that to live. And that is pretty much what synth programming is all about finding the min and the max of things you like and then connecting controllers to do that. And I'm going to do another video on complex modulation because I might want the mod wheel to modulate how much of an LFO is modulating the pitch of an oscillator. And then I might want the mod wheel to also simultaneously increase the speed of the LFO while it's increasing the depth of the LFO that's going to the oscillator. So that's advanced. That is complex modulation, and we'll do that in another video. But basically, I just wanted to show you the most basic things. So I could do aftertouch. I turn that one off, I turn the aftertouch on. And again, because it's bipolar, I can do negative and go this direction. A little bit extreme. And a modulation matrix will let you do many of these connections at once. So while something's sweeping a filter, something else is sweeping a pitch, while something else is sweeping a vibrato, while something else is doing panning, etc., etc. So now let's do something different instead of pitch, although pitch is a great way to hear how a controller is working. If you've ever got something connected to some other parameter and you're going, I can't hear what it's doing, instead connect it to pitch of an oscillator, your brain immediately draws what's going on in your head and you can see what the modulation's doing. So that's why I started with that one. But we could do filter. So I could do a real simple one. I could do mod wheel to filter. And now I'll take my filter and turn it down. And now as I turn this amount up, I should be able to open the filter with the mod wheel. And if I want to set the max, simply put the mod wheel to the max. Set that to the max you want it to go, and now it'll do it. And if I have some resonance and some delay going, I could even make something pretty here. And again, that can work for anything. You could send something to panning, to volume, to delay amount, to delay regeneration, to delay time. Like pretty much anything that has a control destination, you can send a control source to it. So now we're going to move on to some other keyboards just to show you some other ways that a modulation matrix works. Okay, now I have the other three keyboards gathered here, and I'm going to pick an init. Plain sine wave, I'll brighten that up a little. And now I'm going to go to the mod page, and I'm just scrolling to the right, and there's mod slot 1, and it currently says that it's empty. So I push the button, and I'm now down on the bottom half, and now I can use this to change pages. And so status is on is important, so it's working. Then I go to source and it says no source is assigned. And for my first one, I want to do LFO1 to oscillator 1. So I'm going to scroll and my first choice is LFO1. I press the button that locks it in. Very important that you do that because if you don't and you go to the next page, that will disappear. So now I go to the next page, which is destination. And I can see I got filter, oscillator 1, pitch. That's what I want. Again, I lock it in. Now I go to the next page, and that's a depth. Right now the depth is at 0. I shouldn't hear anything. As I turn this up, you should. And the thing to think about all of these modulation possibilities is that all of them are creating the same kind of signal when we're talking about control signals. And so whether it's an LFO going up and down, or an envelope going up then coming down, or something that you move like a mod wheel or whatever, the amount that those go are all the same from min to max. The exception would be things that are bipolar that both go above 0 and below 0. But even still, the same thing is that everything's going from a minimum amount to a maximum amount. The beauty of that is you could put an LFO there, but then decide to put something else there and just swap it out and it'll move the same amount. Now I'm going to take that LFO, I'm going to speed it up a little bit, and I'm going to go backwards, and I'm going to go back to my destination, and instead of pitch, I'm going to change it to filter cutoff. So now, and then again, you have to hit enter. So now I should hear the filter open and close exactly the same way as the LFO. And like before, I have control over the depth of that. But I can do something other than an internal control like an LFO or envelope. I'm going to do trackpad, so up and down, which they call Y+. So I'm going to, as my source, I'm going to choose trackpad, Y+, you press it. Now I've got to go to destination, and I'll do filter cutoff again, press that, and I go one more page. And so right now, with no depth, nothing happens. I'm slipping to the side a little, so you're hearing a little pitch bend. But now as I add the depth, you should be able to hear the filter opening and closing. And notice that it's only doing it in the top half because I chose Y+. You can do multiple things to multiple destinations. Several things can modulate one thing can modulate several things. And so it's important that you just keep trying these things, because that's the only way you're going to get all these different ideas in your mind on what to try. But for example, you could have 3 different modulations, and with 3 different sources all going to the same destination. So 3 different things could be controlling something. And conversely, you could have one thing going to 3 different destinations and various combinations in between. And so again, just keep trying this stuff. And that's why I'm showing it to you on all these different keyboards. So let's move on to the next one. Okay, so now I have the Arturia MicroFreak, a very cool little synth that has its own modulation matrix that's very visible. And kind of in the same way as the Matrixbrute, it has its destinations across the top, and on the left you can see the mod sources. There are also 3 more destinations that you can choose from pretty much anything that you can touch on the front panel. But we're going to start, as always, with the simple one so you hear it, and that will be LFO going to pitch. And the way you do it is you scroll this matrix knob, and it will scroll through all of the possible combinations. And so I use the knob to scroll to the connection I want, which is LFO going to pitch. And if I press the button that locks it in, the light goes solid. And over here, I can see that the LFO is modulating pitch, and it's asking me to now turn the knob to set the amount. So right now the amount is 0. And like the other ones, it's bipolar, so I can add a positive amount or a negative amount. And on a sine wave, you're not going to hear the difference. But now let's go to a sawtooth wave, and you'll very much hear what a positive modulation sounds like versus a negative. So first we'll start with the positive modulation. And now I'll flip it the other way. And if I choose something like random, So now I'm going to pick a different one. So now I'm going to do envelope to filter. So I press the button. Now I'll be able to set an amount. So first I'm going to turn the filter quiet and set an amount now. So now if I close the filter a little bit, I can set how much the envelope is moving the cutoff frequency. And of course, now I can adjust the envelope. And on this one, I could even do polyphonic pressure because these keys are actually polyphonic sensitive. So I'm going to get rid of that one. And the way I get rid of it is I hold it, it sets the value to 0. And now I'm going to do pressure to the cutoff. Press the button to lock it in. Now it doesn't do anything. And as I turn that amount way up, now watch as I put more of my finger on the keys, you'll see it changes the filter cutoff. And by setting the depth, I can set how much I want it to open. But first, I need to set how much I want it to be when I don't press on it. So first I set my low value. And now I can set my high value by setting the amount in the matrix. And as you can see, I can have many things doing this. I have the keyboard or the arpeggiator, which can go to various things. I have pressure, which can go to all those things, LFO, envelope, and the cycling envelope, which is basically an envelope that can loop, so you can make very cool LFO shapes or repeating patterns. But that is how the modulation matrix works on this. Now we'll move on. Okay, now I'm here at the incredible Hydrasynth Explorer. I'm using the Explorer basically to fit on the table, but it doesn't really matter since the engines in the Explorer and the Hydrasynth Deluxe are the same engines. Only difference is the Deluxe has 2 of the engines. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to go again to an init. This one has an init button, so I just hit that twice and yet another init. And on this one, when I want to go into a modulation matrix, I go to the button that's lit up that says Mod Matrix. And you can see pages 1 through 32, which means I have 32 slots to do a modulation matrix, which is very powerful. And so here I am on page 1 of 32, and I see source 1, my assignment, my destination, and my depth. And like a lot of these, you can do the assignment simply by pressing the things. So if I have assignment highlighted, let's say once again I want to do LFO1 to the pitch of oscillator 1, I just press LFO1 and it's there. I come down to the destination, I hit oscillator 1, it's there. I come down and say, well, what particular about oscillator 1? And my choices are, I could either do the pitch or the wave scan. I'm going to leave it on pitch for now. And I'm going to leave the parameter at 0. So as always, it should do nothing. And as I turn it up, we should be getting depth of LFO1 going to oscillator 1. And like the other ones, if I pick a wave that's asymmetrical, so if I make LFO1 instead of a sine wave be a sawtooth up, I'll slow it down a little bit. Then when I go back to the modulation matrix, you'll see that it matters what polarity is. Right now it's in a positive polarity. Okay, but now it's a negative number, so it's going the other way. And I could do the same thing except with an envelope instead of an LFO1. I just go back up to source and I just touch envelope 1. There it is. And I should be able to hear the envelope doing this. The envelope's very boring right now, so let me set that. Okay, now I'll go back to my modulation matrix, and you'll see I can control the depth of that. I can flip it upside down. And like all the other ones, it really doesn't matter what the source is, what the destination is. Those things are swappable. All of them are either going to be something that's sending from min to max, and the destinations are going to be things that are responding to that min to max. And so now that I have the envelope as a destination, instead of oscillator 1 pitch, I'm going to change it to be filter cutoff. So now as I increase this depth, I will be able to increase the depth that the envelope is pushing the filter. Now we can play with the shape of the envelope a little bit. So I could do something unusual and make it be something like filter resonance changing with an envelope. And that's going to sound really different. And if I were to have that going to two things, let's say I had on my second modulation matrix, I'm also going to use that envelope, but instead of controlling the filter's resonance, this time I will control the filter cutoff and get some really unusual things with the same envelope as changing the filter cutoff, but it's also changing the resonance in the same way over time. Or I could make one of them negative. So now, same thing, except the cutoff's going to go in the opposite direction while the resonance is going forward. And so that's basic, simple matrix modulation. What I didn't get into, which I would need to have a whole separate episode for, is how to do complex modulation, where something is wiggling something that's wiggling something. And I'm going to just show it to you real quick, but I'm not going to do it or talk about it. I really want to have a whole separate episode for that. But if I were to do it, I would go to a new page and say, okay, I want mod wheel, for example. And I want mod wheel to change the amount of a different modulation matrix. So I want it to change matrix 2, for example. So I push the mod matrix button and I set that to number 2 and an amount. And now you could see that on top of vibrato, which was already assigned there, I'm changing the amount of resonance over time from an envelope. Very, very complex. Again, that's why I want to save it for a different one. This episode was just about you trying these modulation matrix possibilities on each of these synths, and a lot of the synths have them in different ways. That's why I brought 4 synths for you to see the different ways that it could be done. If you have any further questions about the ASM Hydrasynth, the Arturia MicroFreak, the Cobalt 5S, or the amazing Arturia Matrixbrute, please contact your Sweetwater sales engineer. My name is Daniel Fisher. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. For more videos like this, click here or go to sweetwater.com for all your music instrument and pro audio needs.